Yeah, well, good. I'm glad that we were able to make it.
We did
I
it.
think being as though this is our first episode and we just want it to be real and raw anyway, we can just dive in. I mean, I started
Yeah,
recording a couple of minutes ago,
I love it.
but we basically already had like an introduction episode
Yeah,
of who you are and how we work together,
yeah,
but I don't think that we really dug into like your history,
yeah,
and your experience with
yeah.
coaching clients with their hormones, and then also your experience with your own perimenopause journey. So I don't know. I think that would be a good place to start. What do you think?
Yeah, 100%. Yeah, that's man, like I was actually sitting here thinking about this morning because I felt like we were probably going to shift and talk about this just a little bit. And I was trying to think about like where it all started for me and like where my passion came from, like really digging into that moment of where it came from and if it was my own journey or if it started even before that. It definitely started before that. I mean, I think that I wasn't even going through perimenopause when I started working with women that were experiencing first working with women that were going through fertility journeys, that were on the side and season of life where they were trying to start families and things like that in a body that was dysfunctional.
Mhm.
And I think that that really opened my eyes to so many of the things that we can do early on to really just change the entire landscape of specifically women's sex hormones. I think
Mm.
that, of course, there are wellness journeys for men, but specifically when we're talking about women, we go through such a different experience, a lived experience that is so much different. And it follows us in multiple seasons of life. So, like where I was working with these women in fertility, these were women who were really focusing on either IUI treatments or IVF treatments. So they were women who were having trouble getting pregnant and were having to seek other opportunities, other resources for them to do so. So, when I first brought my functional lens to that, I was working with a doctor. I was collabing with a doctor. That was a very successful reproductive doctor. And, it was very important to him to have success in these women. Okay. Because that was directly tied to his success rate, which of
Mhm.
course, would then have more people coming to his practice over another practice in order to be able to help them. And one of
Mhm.
the things that we really didn't see eye to eye on and we figured this out pretty quickly is that he focused really more conventional. He wanted he was very much a stickler on BMI. And I could talk all day about BMI and how BMI is just not a really good indicator for women as far as
Yeah.
success and how it really feeds into that whole cycle, that mental mind fuck that happens for a woman.
Well, I
Um,
think it makes it's like a should, like you should fit into this box.
yes,
And I think for women especially, we fucking hate being told what we should look like,
yes,
right?
100%. 100% because we do that enough to ourselves, right?
And yeah,
And
and
I
not only
think
that, but it's like wildly inaccurate.
so inaccurate. You can have someone who is extremely lean, but has a large amount of muscle mass, and their BMI is going to be, in an unhealthy range. And so I think that for him to really focus on that number and to really say, when a client would come into the office, it was always met with like, okay, your BMI is here. We need it here before we can even talk about treatment. And this is where I came in because what he really wanted was someone to come in and work with them on the more lifestyle, nutrition, mindset, and things like that. And because he was an allopathic doctor, I was a functional clinician. It meshed really well together because then I got these women, I got to really show them, hey, you're not broken. Whatever it is that brought you into this office, that's not your story. This is where you are right now, but changing these things in your lifestyle and your nutrition and your nervous system and your mindset and emotional blocks that are there, we can really step into a different place. And what we very quickly found was that when we focused on these things on a more functional approach, a lot of times these women would get pregnant on their own. They would not
Mhm.
need to then carry on with, any type of treatment. Now, of course, that's not always going to be the case, right? And I only worked with them for a period. It was usually between 16 and 18 weeks where we would work together. That's a very quick time. Okay.
Yeah.
So, when you have large amounts of dysfunction, you have to work sometimes longer than that to recalibrate the body, rebalance the body. But I think what was really cool about this time in my life of bringing this functional lens to something allopathic was it was the first time that I really believed that you could bridge the gaps between an allopathic model and a functional model. And
Mm,
that's really where I've lived since, in this ability to understand the human body, understand a woman's body because I am a woman, and then to really not go after women in the way of like, this is the right way and this is the wrong way, but
mm,
more so just giving them advocation and agency over their body again, where they get to say, you know what, now I'm just educated. Now I
right.
get to make the decision for myself. Now I
Right.
have two paths. I'm not being told one is right and one is wrong. I'm just able to take that information, feel what vibes with me, and then, step forward into whatever wellness journey feels aligned. And so that's, I think, how I got to where, I am today as far as just my mindset of working with clients in that way. My own personal journey, girl, was a trip. I mean, I feel like every woman you talk to that kind of goes through or starts entering into perimenopause, you and I have talked so extensively about it. Everyone has their own story, and they're so personal. I think that a lot of them can have things that connect and pull in that kind of like, I can relate to that, or oh my gosh, that was my story. But I also think there's no two stories the same. And even if you talk to a woman and she experienced this, the same woman could have experienced very similar, but then also had 12 other things piled on top of that.
That because I have to tell my story a lot.
Yeah.
And depending on the perspective that I'm telling it from, it
Hmm.
seems like a totally different journey because there's so much shit going on in
Yeah.
this process.
Yes.
Like you're feeling a loss of self, like your loss of identity, a disconnection with your body, disconnection with your spouse. It's really difficult to even
Mhm.
describe what you're going through,
Yes. Yeah.
let alone understand it.
Yes. And I don't think that like I told you that I'd really sat with that question, like, when did it start for me? I think that most women can say that they don't know like the time that perimenopause started for them. Because I think
Right.
when they get deep into perimenopause and then they're finally aware of it, I think it's just like any other symptom, right? Symptoms are sometimes hard to recognize when you're in the midst of it. So I think like it took me sitting there and thinking, okay, when did this first kind of start taking its toll on I think it happened for me first in my mind and in my own identity before it happened in my actual symptoms, if that makes any
Interesting.
sense. But and I maybe because I'm a clinician, maybe because
That's what I was gonna
I
say, maybe because you're so, like, in tune,
yes.
I think the
Yeah.
more connected you are to your mind versus your body is where you're gonna
Mhm.
notice the shift first, right?
Yes. Well, and two, we talk about this in the way we work with clients. When we're working with a client, we work in a hierarchy, and we always say that nervous system and structure is first. That's the emotional capacity, the nervous system altogether. And then we go metabolic and down through the other downstream systems. So it would make sense as a clinician. I've always taken care of myself as far as my physiological being, right? I've always made sure my liver was supported. I've always made sure my blood sugar was in a good place. But what I think I found in kind of sitting with this question is I don't think, and I shared this with you even just last week, I don't think I've always been really great at tending to my emotional side of things. And
Mm,
because that's so high up in the hierarchy, because that's where it starts, that's how your nervous system begins to unravel and to dysregulate. I think that's why I didn't notice it in my symptoms first. I think I noticed it more in the shift in my identity, the emotional things I was experiencing, the difficulties in my marriage, the way that I was speaking to myself, the all of those things. I think those were really the first things I started to see, and then, of course, later the symptoms, which I mean, I'm 48 and still experiencing today. So there's just a
yeah.
constant ebb and flow. But I think it was
It's so
definitely more
interesting that you
emotional.
bring this up about, like, when did it actually start, and then, like,
Yeah.
reconsidering the timeline of that.
Hmm.
Because you're right, it is really difficult to pinpoint, and even
Yeah.
once you realize, "Yeah, I'm in perimenopause, and I've probably been in it for a couple years now," and you have more of an idea of where it started, but I
Yeah.
was actually just thinking about this the other day, I was like, "I think it started at, like, 36." I've been
Definitely.
clinging to the idea that it started around 38 or 39. But now I'm looking back and it's like, no, even when I was in okay shape or like in better shape than when I deemed to be my perimenopausal downfall, it was really fucking hard to get there and maintain. And when I really look at how my mental state was at that time, it would make sense if there was an
Mhm.
imbalance going on there. But I think we don't kind of come to terms with it until it's literally screaming at us. It's
So
like
true.
someone has to take you and shake you and be like, don't you see there's something wrong here?
Right. Well, and I think too, you're sitting there the whole time that all of these little things are compounding, and you're like, oh, well, that's just where I'm at this week, or oh,
Right.
that's just because this happened,
Or yeah,
or you're
I
not
have a lot of
actually.
stressful things going on in my life.
Exactly. So you're not actually, and I think this is what I love about, I think this is actually, and I know you've talked about this before, this is actually what I love about perimenopause is that I don't view it as this weak thing that I wear now. I think that there's so many women out there that feel very weak in this season of life. I think what it does is it's a gift that gives you the ability to be very in tune with yourself because you get the opportunity to see your body, your mind, all of it differently, and that is just additional knowledge, right? The body's always giving us information and data. And I think that the more able you are to see that data outside of like testing and things like that from a blood work perspective or what's actually physiologically going on, when you're more in tune and innately aware, that's really powerful. That's really
Right.
powerful. And so I don't look at it as weakness anymore. I actually feel really in tune with when things are off or when things are getting better, where I can like gauge it in that way of like, I was feeling this way 2 months ago and I'm really starting to see benefit. But then I'm
Mhm.
also able to see when something else gets better and something else maybe is falling off. And that I think that this is that ebb and flow and being able to kind of become more tethered to your inner, kind of soul and your inner person is what gives you that ability to just continue to, that's where I think optimization lives, because
Yeah.
people always think of optimization as, well, I have to be well before I can optimize. And true, when you're talking about biohacking and things like that, that's true. You can't
Right.
biohack a sick body or a
Right.
dysfunctional body. But I do think that you can optimize at it wherever you are. Any type of optimization from a dysfunctional place is optimization, right?
Mhm.
So I think it just gives you that ability to do that as a woman.
I really like that you said that you're enjoying this phase of
Mhm.
life, and I think that's a perspective shift that I think a lot of women should recognize,
Mhm.
because as you were saying that, I was like, I kind of like this phase of life too.
Yeah.
It's my favorite. And
I
I
mean,
think it's
honestly, what are your favorite things about, like, I wanna chat about this for a minute because the very first thing that I thought of when I was like, "Why is this my very favorite phase of life right now?" And I think that, like, the first thing that came to my head, I'm just curious if it's, like, the first thing that came to your head. What is your favorite thing about perimenopause?
Well, it's kind of strange, but my favorite thing is that it forces me to take care of myself in
Yeah, I
all the
love that.
ways that I was trying for years to take care of myself. Now I'm forced to. So for
Yeah,
example, like with how alcohol impacts your
yeah,
body. I just don't really drink anymore,
yeah,
because
yeah,
it started with I can't. Oh, I would get a horrible hangover and then I started pulling alcohols out of my habit that I couldn't do vodka anymore and then I couldn't do this anymore and I couldn't do that anymore. And it just kind of forced me to
yeah,
not drink so much. And I've always been the kind of person that I'm a very social drinker. I'll drink too much, but I'm a good
mhm,
time.
yeah, yeah,
But I've always wanted to be the kind of social drinker that could just have one glass of champagne and just be happy with it and not feel like I'm sacrificing so much.
yeah,
And now I'm there because I was fucking forced to, and I
right,
love it. And same thing with like meditation and stretching. Like I have to keep my nervous system regulated. I
yeah,
have to do those things. Otherwise, I will spiral really fucking quick you
yeah,
know? So I think that's my favorite part is that it's made it a non-negotiable for me to
mhm.
actually prioritize the things that I was trying for years and years to prioritize.
Yeah,
And
I
I'm
love
seeing the
that.
benefit of
Mine is definitely a little on the dark, a little on the dark side. I mean, not dark side, but like I definitely wish I was going somewhere like that, but it's definitely the sex for me. I think that for me, it's like the ability to understand my body where I think so many women get to this phase in life and they start hiding from their body. They start hiding from themselves in the mirror. They start hiding from their spouse or their partner. And I think that for me, what this has given me is the ability to be very kind with myself, like to understand the power that I have from a feminine perspective. And I think you and I have talked about that. Because of my job, I live so much in my masculine, like so much in my masculine all the time. And the softness that comes from truly just like accepting that this is not something negative that is happening to you, but this is something really beautiful. It's a season of life. There's so much strength in this season. It has opened me up, I think, sexually. It's allowed me to feel really comfortable in my body, where I might not have felt even in my I mean, even going through having children and raising children with my ex-husband and all of that and all of the things that entail you put so much pressure on yourself and the stress and the things that are going on. I feel really like very free in this season of life. The more that
Mm,
I understand about my body and the more that I understand that I do have control, where I think so many women feel like they don't have control. And I think
mhm.
that just being able to have someone tell you what's going on in your body, and understand it that way can bring a woman back to feeling like, okay, I do have control of these things. And many of the things you just talked about are how you gain that control back, and being able to have these things that are tools that are helping you through this season so you can step into it and feel more like yourself, whether you're coming back to yourself or you're creating a new version, which I think that's an interesting question. We'll probably talk about at some point is whether or not we feel like we're the same person we were like pre perimenopause, or are we a completely different identity today?
Right. Yeah. Yeah. I would like to do a whole episode on that because it does seem like, again, you're forced to reinvent, you know?
Yeah,
It's interesting.
100%.
I wasn't expecting you to say the sex thing
That's
because
so funny.
probably because I'm not there yet. Like we're in different phases of
Yeah,
our process.
yeah,
I'm
yeah.
still like learning to like sex again.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, I think what it is for me is I always, and this is probably a whole nother episode as well, where we can really dig into that. I think there's so much guilt, shame. There's so many different things that are wrapped up in sex. I was married for 20 years before I found Andrew,
Sure.
and I was a completely different person, than I am with him. And so I think because now when I was married, I never was in my masculine. I was always in my feminine because I was very thumbed down, very controlled, all of these things. And now that I am living in the majority of my masculine, it's almost like I've got this power that has just kind of just blossomed, in me and has really opened me up sexually, where instead of just being like, this is the sex path, this is the thing, this is
Right,
where we
right.
go. I'm very open. I'm very free to just experience sex how I want to. And I think that came, I mean, that happened to me during my perimenopause journey. So I equate it to kind of being all part of that journey for sure.
That's interesting. Yeah, like I said, I'm learning to just enjoy
Yeah.
sex again
Yeah.
because it can get painful.
Oh yeah.
It's not so much of like being comfortable with my body at this point.
Right.
Like I
Right.
got comfortable like a year or two ago, but it's more so like I think the chemical side of things. Like I don't
Yeah.
have much of a desire, you
Yeah.
know? But
Yeah.
speaking of the phases of perimenopause, I'm curious like with libido specifically, have you
Mm.
noticed any kind of like phase structure? Like first you lose it and then do you start to gain it back in any kind of specific way?
We get asked that all the time. And the answer is yes and no. Like, I think that, and I actually think it's well, this is my opinion. My opinion is I don't think it is as much to do with the chemical imbalances that are happening in your body as it is what those chemical imbalances do to you in your nervous system, in your emotional capacity, in your mood regulation. I actually feel like it's not one thing, it's several things, right? So I think that for every woman, it can be very different. I have talked to patients that have experienced no loss of libido. I've experienced women who have said that it's the opposite. It's very heightened for them. I've
Mm,
spoken with clients who lose all interest. We get regulation in their body and they never get it back. what I see that is consistent in all of these types of people is that there is some kind of emotional block or there is some type of nervous system dysfunction. And
Mm,
so I truly, truly believe that even with balance in sex hormones, and this is one of the reasons why Dr. Shepherd and I created what we've created, is that, when you start and balance something downstream, if you never remove the bottleneck, you never really fully balance the body. Homeostasis hasn't been achieved. And so I think that really when you start to see that libido is still an issue and you either feel like you're doing all the things or you began to walk into protocols that have made other symptoms or other dysfunctions feel better, it's worth diving into where things are extreme. Where are we seeing things in our emotional capacity or the nervous system that maybe are blocks to fully regaining that desire, the enjoyment process too. I mean, I think that there's, like you mentioned, there's just so many different components, especially for a woman. Okay. And I'm not going to say that men don't experience that to some extent, but I think we can all agree that men don't experience it the way a woman does. And
yeah.
so I think you're going to see different things. You're going to see women who have no libido, but then once they get into the act of, intimacy, then they're fine. You're going to see women who have some libido return that once they get into the act of intimacy, it's painful or there's an emotional tether to something traumatic or something triggering in them. I
Yeah.
think there's just so many. I know that was like a non answer to your question, but I think there's just so many different things. And that's what I love about this is that, and what I hope this conversation between you and I bring up in women is that there are so many different stories, but there's a room for every story.
I think actually it's a really good point that you brought up, and I'm glad that you did because it made me think about a lot of the stories that I've heard from clients where, like you said, you can fix the chemical side of things, but then
Mhm.
if there is still something there emotionally, then you're
Yeah.
still going to run into the issue. And I think that that is one area that's really difficult for a lot of us to want to face, you
Mhm.
know? For example, I did a podcast episode a while back with one of our hormone specialists, and she was explaining how, hormonal birth control can shift the way that you choose your partner
Yeah.
because it changes, not pheromones, but I can't remember exactly, but we're conditioned to not want to have sex with our brother, right?
Yeah.
So
Yeah. Right. Right.
the hormonal birth control impairs that judgment.
Yeah.
And then when you get off of it, and maybe you've married that person that you selected when you were on it, then you have all these conflicting feelings and emotions of maybe I'm not attracted to them anymore, you know?
Yeah.
And I think that when you get to a position like that, it's a really difficult thing to want to face head on and
Yes.
learn the truth, you know? And I think for a lot of women, when we're going through hormonal shifts and everything, we're faced with truths that are too scary to address. So we just kind of keep and we just kind
Mhm.
of bottle them up and continue. It's hard either way, right?
Well, absolutely, but I will say from personal experience that never works, right? I mean, I know that we both can attest to that. It's like you can keep compartmentalizing and you can keep pushing it down and you can do all of those things, but it's going to keep resurfacing. It's just like it's just like symptoms, the more they are not dealt with, they're going to cause additional things. We're going to see domino effects of things happening. And I think that goes back to why I feel like this is one of the best seasons of life for me and why I really don't look at perimenopause as negative anymore is because one of the things it's allowed me to do is reinvent myself.
Mm.
And I think that by the time we get to our, late 30s, 40s, and we're going through these shifts, I mean, it might be a good time to reinvent ourselves, right? We've learned a lot of
Right.
things. There's probably a lot of things that we've done that we're like, man, wish I wouldn't have done that, or wish I hadn't made
Well,
those
and for
choices.
you,
Or
your kids are all grown up, so you
yes,
get to kind of step out of like the,
yes,
hands-on mom and step
yes.
into who you want to be now.
Yes, and you get to be selfish, and I don't think it was a design flaw. I don't think it's an expiration date. I don't think it was a coincidence that it was done at this point in our lives, like at
Mhm.
this age. We still have so much life left to live, and we've already done so much life that required us to give of ourselves to other things like families, friends, whatever that careers, whatever. I think that the reason that, I mean, I like to believe that the reason it happens now is because we are at a point where we can be selfish, and women have a hard time being selfish.
I
Women just
know.
have it's like innately not part of who we are in our DNA, right? We're just, we care for people. We're nurturers by nature. And I think that when you can accept and almost like surrender to the fact that it is okay to be selfish, actually your selfishness is what allows you to be more nurturing. You know,
Right.
your ability to be selfish and to say, okay, I have to fill my cup first, and my emotions matter before anyone else's, and my goals matter before anyone else's. That allows you to then be the best version of yourself so that you can give more to the people that you love and want to nurture. I think it's when we start stealing our own joy and start stealing from our own cup that we think we're nurturing, but then we wear it like this badge of honor, like, well, I'm nurturing people so much, or I'm giving so much that I just don't have time for myself. And that's
Mhm.
actually not like, that's not something to be proud of, you know?
No, it's
That's
really not.
definitely not.
That tells me you have a priorities issue, that you have an organizational issue,
Yes.
that you have a boundaries issue.
Yes. Yes. Exactly. Exactly.
But I
So
agree.
that's
That's my theory too, is that I believe that in our, 20s and 30s, we were supposed to hustle and grind
Mhm.
and, build the family
Yeah.
and create the household and build the business. And I agree. I think that we're being forced to slow down and step into our feminine because that required a masculine version of us.
Yep.
Step into our feminine for this phase of life because we are meant to be able to actually enjoy it now. Imagine if
Yes.
you were in your feminine era when you were trying to grow a business and build and raise kids, you know?
Right. 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 Well, and I think too, it's like if you've spent, 40 years of your life, obviously when you were younger, your family, your parents were nurturing you. But as you get into those adult years and you're nurturing everyone else, hopefully you did it well enough that it's time for you to get some back for yourself, and you've set up, it's kind of like what, in our businesses, when we set up streamlined systems and automations that are supposed to help us and support us. By the time we get to perimenopause and we're going through that transition phase of getting to step into our feminine more, I
Mhm.
think that everything that we've built should support the ability for us to do that. And if it doesn't support that, I think that's worth auditing. I think it's worth looking at and kind of taking stock of why, and I think that's part of it anyway when a woman is starting to kind of create a new identity or really get back to the core of what she wants and what she desires and what kind of life experience she wants to live, which I think happens when you're going through seasons of perimenopause just naturally.
Mhm.
Because then I think you're able to see what is serving and what is not, for
Right,
sure.
right. I do think that maybe next time we should talk about why we both decided to move to Mexico like we did,
Yeah,
because I
100%.
I don't think it's
Get the
any
fuck out of the
coincidence
US.
that it happened in our 40s.
Yes. Yes. I
I
mean,
mean, that too, yes, but
right.
I could never I mean, yeah, I up and moved to Maui when I was 31, but to another country, like,
Yeah.
I don't think I could have done this 10 years ago.
Yeah.
I don't know if I was free enough, you know?
No, 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 I definitely wasn't. And I think that is that's going to be a very good conversation because I think just it goes into so much of reinventing yourself too and like learning new things about yourself, but also like accepting things about what you just won't tolerate anymore and what things you let go of, things that were important that aren't anymore.
Yeah.
There's just so many things that as women keep us captive in our minds and our bodies and our relationships, just so many different things that I think when you can let go of those, a free life, like getting to pick up and move from a country you've lived in your entire life is, I mean, unless you've done it, you don't truly understand,
Right.
but it's yeah, it's game changer.
It's, like, so empowering, and,
Yeah.
the more that because this is, I think, like, the 3rd time that we've just sold everything and moved,
Yeah.
you know?
Yeah.
The more you just do that, the
Hmm.
more trust you have in yourself,
Yes.
and your ability
Yeah.
to do hard things.
Yes, and the shedding layers, like, every time, because 'cause we've done the same, like, getting rid of a 6,000 square foot house when the kids all went to college and say, I mean, I remember us sitting, girl, we're gonna have such a great, like, episode when we talk about this. I literally remember sitting on the floor of our study, going through like, cabinets that we were opening and deciding to get rid of family pictures that I had kept forever. And my husband and I
Yeah.
are so different. Because he's, he's foreign. He's from New Zealand. He has always looked at family differently. Family family to me is something that I have to do. To him, family is like, if I love my family, I will give them time. If I don't and they don't serve me, I'm not going to. And we
Mm,
just have this very different view. And so when I'm going through these pictures, he's like, babe, we can't take these things. Like this is so much shit. We have so much shit. We've got to get rid of stuff. And it was very difficult for me to like start purging my life, even my past life, but there was so much healing and layers that came off, and being able to like open up those cabinets and things I'd stuffed away anyway, things I wasn't
you
viewing
were
every day. I
looking
wasn't
at,
looking at
yeah,
every day, and being able to say, okay, I am actually going to tangibly let it go. Like and there was a lot of healing, a lot of tears, a lot of like anger and things that happened during that time of us just like getting rid of our house. Like we sold so much. We literally sold everything. We came here on a plane on Independence Day, actually, which was super funny. We left on July
that's
4th.
pretty cool.
It was hilarious. And then we literally packed up our Jeep, and someone shipped our Jeep down here. That was our stuff. I mean, we have a storage unit in Dallas, but it doesn't have got rid of all of our furniture, everything. And that was such a big step for me, because in my life, I've just always built a life, I built
Right.
a home, and I built so but it was so freeing. It felt so like, yeah, it just felt really good. It felt like stuff. And now I just don't even look at stuff the same. I'm like, stuff is nothing. Experiences are everything,
That.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think that's like the core of this is like you are realigning your values. Like it's
Hmm.
not just an identity shift with
Yeah.
that new identity that you're building. That new
Hmm.
identity has a new value system too.
Yep.
Like there's a lot that goes on that has nothing to do with the actual like hormonal side of
Yep.
things.
So
You know?
much. I would
I mean,
argue
they're the
more so.
driver, right? They do
Yeah.
impact,
Yeah.
but it's really interesting the things that I notice are not being talked about, right? Because my value system changed too, you know?
Hmm.
We got rid of fucking everything, like
Yeah.
our cars and all of that.
Same. We just kept our Jeep. That's it.
Yeah, and we each had 3 suitcases when we moved
Yep.
here, and
Yep.
one of them was Chewy's. So now I'm down to 1 suitcase because once you get rid of everything, like, for
Mm.
me, it kind of becomes an addiction because
Yeah.
the less you have, the more clean and organized your space can be. So
Yep.
I'm just like, "We're getting rid of this, we're getting rid of that." I'm getting rid of my hair dryer and my steamer this week because I just don't fucking need them. You know?
Yeah. Yeah.
2 less things to pack up in my suitcase next time we
Man, that's
move.
so true. That's so true. That's so true.
But
No, it's
it's
definitely
interesting
freeing.
because it makes it so your life is a lot less stressful because you have
Mm.
a lot less clutter, you know?
Yes, yes, it definitely does. It's game changer. That's going to be a great episode, because there's so many things to talk about. Because you mentioned something about the hormonal chemical imbalance, and that's really something that I want to anchor into the women that are listening, is that that's downstream, right? We talk about it all the time. That's downstream. So the idea, it may sound woo woo, and it may sound weird, but the idea that you can experience life the exact way you design it in your head, and if you step into it emotionally, if you emotionally tie things to that vision of how you want to experience it, then what is the capacity of your body to match that also? Because your nervous system is regulated, and because
Yeah.
your emotional focus is on obtaining that, does everything else in the body fall in line? Because if everything is a hierarchy, then it makes sense that if your nervous system and your emotions and everything structurally is aligned to send those signals to the rest of the body, I mean, there's balance and there's harmony, and that's how I believe.
Yeah. I'm so glad that you brought that up because I think that it's something that we overlook a lot, that you
Mm,
can want a certain lifestyle,
mhm.
but if you are not able to hold space
Yeah,
for what's required for that lifestyle, then you're going to have a lot of resistance in getting there. I don't think that we
100%.
realize that enough. And I especially didn't realize that for a very long time.
Yeah,
I was always like, I want to build a bigger business. I want to make more money. I want to do all these things, but I
right.
didn't have space to hold any of that because honestly, my nervous system has been fucked up, I think, my whole life. And I can say that now because I'm realizing how it feels to have a more calm sense of
Mhm.
being, I've finally felt what is. I never felt that
Yeah.
like ever, even as a child. And so now
Yeah.
I'm realizing, oh, I've just been this way my whole life. Perimenopause just magnified it.
Right.
And the
Right.
reason that I never had the life that I have right now is because how the fuck could I? I was running around burnt out and overwhelmed and stressed all the time. That version of me would not appreciate a life like this. She'd be stressed out all the time.
Well, and two, like when you are constantly keeping your body in that state, because your body is always trying to protect you, your body is like it's like your homie. He's like the OG, right? Standing there right beside you, really trying to match what you need and adapt to protect you.
Mm,
And so if you're constantly telling your body, giving it signals that you're in fight or flight and that you're in danger and that there's trauma and that there's, things going on, then what you're going to experience is you're going to experience a body that doesn't prioritize anything other than survival. And
mm,
that's where I think the big issue comes in for a lot of people is they don't realize that the things they're doing there in their nervous system and the way that they're living and the stress that they're existing in is constantly making the body prioritize survival over balance, over harmony. And so, if
oh,
we can just realize those things and stop stripping the energy that the body needs to just function optimally and having to give to the stress response because it's just trying to help you, right? And I mean, it's the most simple but hardest thing to explain to someone because I don't really know why it's hard to explain to people because it seems really simple, right? It just seems like stop being so damn stressed out all the time, but
right. Well, and
it is hard.
I would like to dig deeper on that because based on the faces of the women that I talk
Yeah.
to about
Yeah.
this, you can see it on their face. They
Uh-huh.
know logically that that is true,
Mhm.
but I don't think it's believing it. I think it's understanding how to actually implement it. And the
Yeah, so
implementation, the thought of that seems to stress them out. And so we're sitting here
mhm,
saying, you need to
mhm.
stop being stressed out.
So
But I
you know
need
what
you to
I
eat
think
more
it
and move
is?
less, and that stresses them out.
Yes. And you know what I think it is? I think it's two-pronged. I think you said something earlier. You said, that you have to be aware, that you have to stop doing certain things in order to exist in a different reality, these types of things. I mean, women are out there all day long saying, I want to be able to lose weight. I want to be able to lose weight. They know that I mean, they have a desire to lose weight. And that's what you were saying. You were like, you can want something. But if you're not willing to do the things that it requires, so it's not the wanting, right? I mean, we know that women are aware that these things are going on. What I truly believe, and I can say this because it was that way for me for so long. I think that the woman who can't take action is the woman who thinks she doesn't deserve what's on the other side of that action. I
Mm,
think it's actually very little to do with the fact that they're like so stuck that they can't move because I think because we've seen this in clients and patients, once someone decides I want that. Like, period. I want that. You can tell it in their actions. You can tell it in their compliance. You can tell it in their discipline because they've actually accepted that not only do I want it, I deserve it. And I'm worth that. I'm worth giving the time and the energy and the discipline and the commitment, the surrendering of myself. How many women want to lose weight, but sabotage themselves on the weekends? Or drink alcohol, and eat late at night. Or, I mean, there's just a million different things. Or buy the gym membership but never go, or prioritize their children and their husband over making time for themselves to food prep, or a million different things. We could like literally go on and on. But I think that what I found in myself and what I think I've found in working with hundreds, thousands at this point, women is that the majority of them don't feel like they're worth it. They either feel like they're not worth enough for the time that it would take away from people that they feel that they're supposed to take care of, or they just don't find themselves worthy enough to do that, to be selfish enough to do it.
I think that what you just said there, that's the silver bullet is if they're in a position to prioritize themselves versus prioritizing their husband, kids, family, friends,
Uh-huh.
whatever. If they choose to prioritize them, I think it's because it feeds into what they believe of themselves,
Hmm.
right? Like
Hmm.
who would you be if you started putting yourself first? Would you still feel like you're a good mom? Would you still feel like you're a good wife? Right? What would you feel like you're still offering the
Right.
world and the people that are around you if you put yourself first, you know? And I think it's the reality of that a
Yeah.
lot of people they don't really sit in. For one, they don't, no
Mhm.
one asks themselves that question. Who would I be if
No.
I did this? You know,
Right.
what would it mean of me? And what would I still have to offer to then be loved in return? You know,
Right.
because something that I had to really go through is realizing that I am not worthy of love because of what my body looks like,
Uh,
and I'm not worthy of love because of how successful my business is. I'm worthy of love because I'm fucking awesome,
mm,
you know? And it took all of 42 almost years to figure that the fuck out.
yeah.
But
Yeah.
once I did, that's when I truly started putting myself first and didn't place my value and my worth on all these other things that are really circumstantial. And I think that pulled me out of that really dark place that I was in for a long time because I attached my worth and my sense of self and value to what my body looked like so much that when it didn't look the way I wanted it to, I was like, I have nothing to offer. I might as well just not even exist anymore,
Yeah.
you know?
Yeah.
And I think a lot of women are tied to that in some regard, maybe not just to the way their body looks, but to how they show up as a mom or
Mhm.
as a wife, you know, or as a daughter. And it's terrifying to let that go, but it's also equally as terrifying to keep it, you know, because then you
100.
never see your potential.
Yes, because I think too when you can, what worked for me, I mean, honestly, and it's gonna sound silly, but I had all of those things you just said. I mean, we're already tying our worth to emotions. Emotions are literally already being tied to everything that we do. Our emotions around food, our emotions around our spouse, our emotions around our children, our emotions around our job, all of the different things. We're already tying them to emotions. What if we tied them to the emotion that we want instead of the emotion
Mhm.
that we feel in the moment? So if we have
Yeah.
a goal and we're saying, I want to feel good in my body. When you feel good in your body, what emotion are you going to feel? And then start tying those emotions to everything else that you do in a day to see if it lines up with the goal you have. Because
Mm.
then I feel like if every woman were to ask themselves, okay, this is the version I am right now. These are the emotions I feel. This is how I show up every day to all the people that I love, all the things that I do. And then if they took their kind of what I call, your signature emotions or your dream frequency. And you took those emotions and you said, okay, how I show up today, if I were showing up as this person over here, how would it look? Would I be giving more? Would I feel better in myself, better with my children, better with my spouse, better in my job? They're always going to say yes. And so
Mhm.
why are we focusing on the emotions that are negative, on the emotions that keep us stuck, that keep us where we are in the dysfunction, that keep us, in this state of not loving ourselves and not being able to come from a place of contribution instead of stepping into that life experience that we want to live, the emotions we want to
Mhm.
experience. I that's how I really was able to kind of shift myself out of such a dark place, was to not focus on where I currently was, but where I was going, like
Mm.
where my goals and my dreams were taking me and what I was designing, what life experience I wanted to have.
Mm. Yeah. I really like that, what you said. Mainly, we just focus on the future and how we want to feel, you
Mhm.
know? And I think that like once you figure out the method for that, it's so easy for women like us
Yeah.
because we are always thinking about the potential future. It's just usually in a negative sense. And that's
Yep.
why we all have anxiety.
Yep. Yep. 100%. 100%.
But yeah, no, I love that. And I've had to start doing that in like little practices for myself
Yeah.
recently too, because for example, I have a really difficult time sticking to my nightly routine. For some
Yeah.
reason, I'm super good with my morning routine, but come nighttime because I'm so fucking tired and it's so
Yep.
easy to just go to bed, I tend to neglect it, but it makes such a big difference
I know.
for my sleep quality, for my time management in the morning, and just overall how I feel and show up. And so I've
Yeah.
had to start like forecasting. How am I going to feel in the morning if I do this versus how am I going to feel if I don't do this? And
Yep.
I literally like walk through the whole day. Okay, if I wash my hair tonight and I take a shower and I do my skincare and blah, blah, blah. It's going to take 30 minutes, but that's 30 minutes that I don't have to do all those things in the morning. So that's
Yep.
another 30 minutes I get in my day, which I always feel like I don't have enough time. I'm going to
Right.
feel really good when I go to bed tonight. I might want to have sex,
Yeah.
and
Yeah.
just like all these little things that you don't realize, that little sacrifice of time is actually giving you all the things that you want. And you say you don't have the energy or the time to
Uh-huh.
do, you know?
100%. And isn't it funny that like we still, because we've sat here and talked about so many things that we've done and figured out, but I love that we still don't have it figured out, Because honestly, I don't want to have it figured out. I want to keep learning about myself and learning about my body and learning about like how I kind of almost, equate it to that like another rung, like the constant level up that you get to do, because I think of who I was 5 years ago, 10 years ago, and man, shit, I've leveled up a lot, personally. And so it's fun to think about like where could I be going? Like where am I headed?
Right.
Where am I gonna get? Like what does 50 look like? That's exciting, where before I think I would have looked at 50 and been like, well shit, I'll be halfway to dead,
Mhm. Yeah.
not being able to do anything. I definitely won't enjoy going, to the beach in a bathing suit or going on vacation or doing anything really. So I think it's just exciting to be in a place where you're constantly learning and it's constantly evolving for
Yeah.
sure.
It is, and that's really, like, the purpose of life,
Mhm.
because for some reason, I don't know why, I don't play video games a
Yeah.
lot, but for some reason, I decided that life is like a video game. And
Yeah.
imagine if you won a video game, but then you had to continue playing.
Yeah.
You already won it. It's so not exciting. And like
Right.
maybe you continue playing and you find like little Easter eggs and little things, or maybe you get highest score next time you play.
Right.
But for the most part, it's really fucking boring. Life is supposed to be a series of problems that we solve and we grow and learn from in the meantime while we're
Yeah.
creating a new future.
Yeah,
That's what makes it
exactly.
fun.
Exactly. No, I love that. And then like, just being able to every time you reach a goal, that just gives you the opportunity to set a new goal,
Right.
and I think yeah, no, I mean I'm absolutely vibing on my 40s for sure. I think the 40s are great. Every woman should be excited about getting into their 40s. I don't think that what I really, really want us to do is kind of take away the stigma of perimenopause being such a negative. I think the reason it's a negative is because so many women are going into it not understanding or not
Yeah.
having tools to have started looking at it previously. Like before there's just not been a lot of education, and it's been so taboo to talk about or almost treated like this terrible phase that you go through that you're not going to enjoy, and you can't possibly enjoy it because your body is like dying or it's not fruitful. And there's so many good things that can come from perimenopause, and more than anything I think just a deeper understanding of self, and
Yeah.
hopefully we'll be able to kind of shed some light on that for people for sure.
I love that you kind of like brought it all back to that, because that's kind of how we started this.
Yeah.
It's like the perfect kind of closure for this conversation, and I agree. I think that it's been like vilified,
Mhm.
and we're meant to feel like there's something wrong with us,
Yeah.
but there is a lot of positive that comes out of it. A lot of
Mhm.
positive personal growth,
Yes.
and it's also like just the beginning, right? I
100%.
think it's
Yes.
allowed us to see ourselves in a different light because certain parts of the, like, noise have gone
Mhm.
away, you know?
Yes.
So, yeah. Well, good. This was fun.